Welcome to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast, where we discuss topics related to sterile and non-sterile compounding pharmacy in an effort to promote compliance and increase quality. The Pharmacy Inspection Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, delivering quality and meaningful conversations and discussions about our pharmacy industry and the critical role pharmacists play in our healthcare systems. Learn more at pharmacypodcast.com. Please welcome your hosts, Brian Prince and Seth DePasquale.
Hello and welcome to all of our compounding friends and colleagues to the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast with my co-host Seth DePasquale and myself, Brian Prince. We had a blast last week in Ponte Vedra, Florida at the American College of Apothecaries annual conference. It was really great getting to connect with our old friends and even making some new friends, and it was even more awesome hearing the kind comments from those conference attendees who told both Seth and I that they really enjoyed the content and our mission for quality and safety in the compounding industry through this podcast. And just so you know, the trip was made possible by our sponsor, Encore Scientific. Encore Scientific, with over 70 years of combined experience, the Encore team is able to provide the highest quality chemicals, bases, equipment, and consulting services at the lowest possible cost to your pharmacy. Please visit them at encoresci.com or by phone 800-454-2304 and discover the benefits of a relationship with Encore Scientific. Once again, encoresci.com. That's ENCORESCI.com, or call them direct at 800-454-2304 and mention this ad that you heard it on the Pharmacy Inspection Podcast and receive 20% off your next order. This week, we speak with Erika Fallon from Fallon Wellness Pharmacy, and she serves on the IACP's Board of Directors on their Legislative Committee. Erika, thanks for joining us. Please tell us more about yourself and your path into compounding pharmacy.
I'm Erika Fallon, and I work at Fallon Wellness Pharmacy as the supervising pharmacist. I've been doing this job since about 2008, and I love it. I am very involved with IACP, Legislative Committee, and also sit on the board at IACP. I think that's really awesome. I graduated from Albany College of Pharmacy in 2008, and I've basically been involved in pharmacy and compounding pharmacy for my entire career as a pharmacist.
When did you first get started in compounding? Because, I mean, your dad has owned that for, forever. So, were you in the pharmacy as a little kid making up stuff?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's in my blood. I'm a third-generation pharmacist. I basically grew up behind the counter, if you will, just straightening shelves, since I could stand, essentially. By the time I was heading to pharmacy school, Fallon Pharmacy, as I know it today, was already specializing in compounding. So that's how I initially got involved in the compounding niche. And when I graduated, there wasn't actually a job for me here at Fallon Pharmacy. So I ended up taking a retail job in Palm Springs, California. And maybe, I don't know, I wasn't even there for 6 weeks before a local compounding pharmacy owner was in my retail store saying he heard Erika Fallon was in town and how can he get me to work for him. So I actually worked in a compounding pharmacy out there for a while, and then eventually something opened up for me out here, and I came back to good old upstate New York, my stomping grounds, and I was immediately put in the position of supervising pharmacist.
So within your role within IACP, how did you first get involved in all that? Because that's a totally I don't think that a ton of compounding pharmacists are really involved in the whole legislative side, although I think they all should be. on some level. So I think it's interesting when somebody is, really interested in the whole legislative, regulatory side of things, like myself. So how did you? What's your kind of backstory? How'd you get involved?
It may not come as a huge shock, but the NECC tragedy and the passing of DQSA was really what got me actively involved with IACP. I'd been a member since I was in pharmacy school. I never really did much with the membership, but I went to Compounders on Capitol Hill in 2014 and did a ton of networking, and I was pretty enthusiastic about the regs. I was doing a lot of sterile compounding at the time. Obviously, New Hampshire and Massachusetts are neighbors of mine, and they, it affected the whole country. But I just found myself really propelled into the whole scene of people who were enthusiastic about legislation like I found I was. There was lots of engaging with other legislative enthusiasts. And, it wasn't more than a couple months later I was recruited onto the legislative committee. And, just an email, hey, we noticed you and come be on our committee. And I accepted right away. At that time, obviously, things were extremely dynamic. And I think the legislative committee was teleconferencing twice a week then. So, it was very involved. There was guidances dropping all the time. And, we've also had USP 797 and USP 800 come out for revision since then, tons of new state regs. So I can't really explain it, but when new legislation drops, or is announced, it kind of feels like Christmas morning to me. I can't wait to read it and circle things and draw lines through things and put exclamation points next to other things and comment next to stuff. Scan it in and send it all to all my legislative friends, so that's it.
So yeah, you're a regulatory nerd is basically what
I'm a regulatory nerd. That's right.
Nice.
I don't know why I love it, but I do, and I get excited about it.
So what's the latest with IACP? What's the thing that you've been working on lately?
My most recent project was kind of just, it was so detail oriented, but FDA has a group of lists that they've put bulk chemicals into categories, and I had the side project of going through list 3 and picking out things that shouldn't be on it. So, basically this is items that were nominated. We don't really know who nominated them or where the nominations came from per se, but things that maybe don't belong on that list. And there's plenty of them, inactive ingredients, synonyms for chemicals that do have USP monographs and compounders can definitely compound with. So sort of cleaning that up, how significant is that? To reduce some confusion and issues going forward, people thinking they can't compound with some inactive ingredient because it's on that list, for example. Besides that, some of the stuff we've been working on just in general on legislative committee, just reviewing and commenting and sort of developing IACP's comments on various regulations, all the FDA guidances, plenty of, state board regs, 797, 800. In some cases, we see that revisions are made, based on items that we came up with as suggestions for revision. And sometimes you don't really see it, and it's more of a long game. So, in many instances, all the projects I've worked on are really helped and augmented in the committee process, because I'll have my own ideas about things. Then you get together with a group and everyone's coming in, with their unique perspectives and skill sets. So things I never thought of, other people are thinking of. So it's really great to be on it's actually a pretty large committee and a very active committee. So it's nice. I would say one of my strengths or major contributions that I have in the committee is more in the editing process. For instance, we come up with a document, okay, here's what we're going to say and here's how we're going to comment. And, in reading or listening to it, something we've compiled, I have a knack for, rewording it or to make the language stronger or cleaner or more effective, to make sure we're saying what we want to say, especially in editing legislative language, like the language of the DQSA. So we want to make this change, and kind of as you go through the document, you say, oh, if we change this word here, we have to change it, 10 times down the document. So that's one of the things I have a bit of an eye for as well. Sounds fun, right?
Oh yeah. Did you see the whole thing with Pew Charitable Trust's most recent release of their compounding assessment?
I didn't read it yet. It's on my list. I know that IACP responded to it right away. But no, I haven't gone through it. Did you guys go through it yet?
I haven't. Are you on, Brian, are you on their list, IACP's mailing list?
I am not, because I am not actually a member of that organization.
Oh, Brian, if I have one goal here today, it's to make sure you join.
Duly noted. I am going to speak this year at Compounders of Capitol Hill. I had the pleasure of speaking last year, so it's always nice to get the invitation to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not, I guess, would they call it maybe a corporate member or whatever, because I really don't have a corporate business per se. I'm not a chemical supplier. I'm just Brian, the podcast lowly consultant guy. So I don't know that it's really justified, but it may,
well,
maybe so.
We may have a category for you. One of the things we're looking at is expanding categories of membership. In other words, you can be friend of compounding, and I think there's an excellent rate of joining, on that level as well. So.
Well, I am a friend of compounding. What a coincidence!
You are.
You are. Totally.
So make it official, like if it's not IACP official, it's kind of being, Facebook official. Get on it.
Facebook official. That's too serious for me. I can't put myself out there like that, but certainly appreciate it. Erika, I know that you are involved with the IACP at a very deep level, but then there's the Erika, that's the pharmacy owner. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit, and let's talk about your thoughts on USP 800.
I guess, the best way I can answer it is just as Erika, because, even coming into IACP, that's what I'm coming in with. And, when we make recommendations from IACP, we're sort of taking, the entire membership on board so far as what's going to make everyone happy and what do we think is best for the profession and, promoting patient access. That's probably the biggest thing. So, you might almost look at it from IACP more globally. How is this going to affect patient access to medications, and sort of going about it that way? Do we have a choice about implementing USP 800? I don't know that we really do. I mean, we've had FDA in our pharmacy twice. If they have any interest in enforcing it, I'm sure I'll see them again someday, and they'll be wondering what we've done to implement it. I'm a huge fan of safety, personnel safety, reducing cross-contamination. Do I think USP 800 has flaws? Absolutely. I think that some of the items are difficult and too constrictive to sort of comply with without starting over from scratch and redoing your whole setup. Some of the things we already do, okay, all of my chemicals are stored under negative pressure right now, for instance. We have a powder hood that's dedicated to working with, I would say cytotoxic chemicals. And, it's sort of reworking it to say, okay, now we're going to make our progesterone cream after we make our cyclophosphamide, which we wouldn't normally do, right? So it's a little bit complicated and difficult to wrap our heads around. But I've always been going towards a USP 800 type thing where you don't want your employees to be exposed to anything. I think there was a great case. It was in New York State, actually. A pharmacy student was working in a compounding pharmacy, compounding fentanyl, and he went into cardiac arrest and went into a coma and ended up dying. That's just due to not having the proper PPE. That's it. So, is it important? Yeah, the first thing I have anyone who comes in here, whether it's a new technician, new pharmacist, pharmacy students, they go through my safety SOPs first and foremost. What are we working with here, and how do you protect yourself from it first and foremost? So I don't know. I think USP 800 as a safety philosophy is good. Down to the minutia, I think it's a headache.
FDA has their own thoughts on all this, and I think first and foremost, they're mostly concerned with microbiological contamination, not necessarily, and cross contamination to definitely, but and not to say they don't care at all about personnel protection, but it's sort of secondary to the product protection. So I don't know. It's a weird discussion, but at the end of the day, I think no, it's not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. Someone at one point had posed an excellent point or question about USP in general. If you look at their mission, nowhere does it say anything about personnel protection or protecting the employees that do this type of work. So there was a question too. Okay, so what's their place or their motivation, for doing something like this? And Stuck, to your point, I agree completely. FDA's primary concern is definitely not personnel protection. They want to know, are you wearing your gloves so the product's protected? And are you changing your gloves between hazardous preps to make sure that, this chemical is not getting in that chemical? So, yeah, agree.
We've just had so many people since we've talked about this, from Lloyd Allen to, and whether we've actually put this, in the publicly available podcast or not, everyone's basically saying the one thing that's kind of missing is that there's no levels. There's no levels that they're assessing or saying that you have to maintain all your drug levels below X. And that's not, there's no data available for any of that kind of stuff. So I think until a lot of that stuff comes out, I just don't feel like USP 800, unfortunately, is going to be taken seriously. But, it should. I do agree that it should. I think, like you're saying, personal protection is important. We're not trying to kill or harm our employees by any means. So
I think one of the saving graces of USP 800 is actually their little risk assessment clause, right? So you can go through and assess your entire practice and sort of write your own USP 800 rules and have nice justifications for everything that you do.
Yeah.
Hey, I use hormone stock creams that I buy from a company. They're not volatile. There's no powder containment to worry about. Guess what? Those aren't getting done in my hazardous lab. They're getting done in my non-hazardous lab. And my chlorambucil stock suspension that I'm going to use to make all of my chlorambucil liquids is going to stay in my non-hazardous refrigerator because it's not a containment issue at that point.
Right. I think I wish, if I had my wish list, I would honestly ask for that whole risk assessment to be expanded a little bit. It basically gives you exception with solid dosage forms, but beyond that, you really can't. I don't know. It doesn't really give much leeway in terms of anything else. I would argue that you can probably do a risk assessment on, just about anything you're doing and figure out how to contain it properly without going full bore USP 800.
Right. What's a regulator going to come in and you have a huge document explaining why you do everything you do and why that's safe? You know what I mean? I'm a regulator. I'm going to look at that and be like, wow, they've thought it all through, and this seems like they're doing a good job, or whatever. I think being able to justify what you're doing and why your employees are safe and you're meeting sort of the goals of USP 800 will eventually be something that's accepted, if not immediately accepted. Everyone's going to do it in their own way, to one degree or another.
The first thing that you can do, when an FDA inspector comes in and they're questioning, why are you doing this? Well, if you had a 100-page booklet on why you're doing that, all the studies that you did to come to that conclusion, they'd probably walk away going, okay, cool.
Right.
I just feel like that's the way it should be. What is your advice for compounding pharmacists or technicians that would like to get involved within regulatory legislative topics within IACP or not? Not necessarily. You don't necessarily have to go through IACP to do this. I suppose there's other organizations, but probably IACP is the best one to get involved with. But you can talk about that too.
Yeah, I mean, IACP, we have the infrastructure. I strongly encourage compounders to get involved, period. Many ways to do it. Joining ACP, or IACP, I'm sorry, if you aren't already a member. Joining the legislative committee. If you really like legislation or you want to be involved, that's probably, the best thing you can be doing. I'm so glad that I do it. It really is an excellent outlet for me wanting to be involved. Come to Compounders on Capitol Hill. Storm the Hill with us, with IACP. We need everyone's voice, as we work to preserve patient access to compounded medications. Other ways you can do it, other ways I do it, attend your state board of pharmacy meetings as much as possible. If compounding's on the agenda, I'm definitely going to be there. And, I try to go to other ones or at least send a intern or something like that to take notes for me. There's always, spoken tidbits that are coming out about these things, about regulations or what's coming your way. That's a great way to keep a pulse on what's happening. And then another thing, know your legislators, know your local congressman and, introduce yourself. Inviting them into your pharmacy is a great way just to spread awareness of, hey, this is something unique that we do, and, people in our district depend on it. That goes a long way with just initially building a relationship. And then if you ever do have an ask, you have that connection already. So, those are the ways that I like to do it. And, one of the things I also like about IACP and being involved with legislation and regulatory is just, the ability to network with your peers and people that aren't even necessarily your peers, That's one of my favorite parts of IACP, whether it's just being on the board or in a committee or just being a member, you sort of humanize and get to know your competitors, as well as your colleagues. And it's sort of it's a nice thing. I really enjoy it, and that's it.
Erika, thank you. Seth and I genuinely appreciate you joining us this week and sharing your obvious passion for the compounding industry. And thank you for the great advice to our listeners about getting involved with the IACP to make their voices heard. Also, I do encourage everyone to come join us in June at Compounders on Capitol Hill. I have the honor of being invited back to speak again this year, and that'll be on Monday, June 25th, and I'll be speaking about USP 800 design solutions, but more importantly about forming a distinctive and linear plan for accomplishing hazardous drug handling compliance. But don't come because of me. Come because it's your opportunity to get involved and storm the Hill and possibly meet with your state's representatives to let your voices really get heard at that point. Thank you again to Encore Scientific for sponsoring the podcast at the ACA's annual conference and, in fact, this episode. At Encore Scientific, their goal is to awaken your senses to a team of experts who deeply care about building a personal relationship with their customers. They value one-on-one conversations with their customers and look forward to helping you solve your everyday challenges. So I encourage you, call them at 800-454-2304, and again, mention this ad and receive 20% off your next order. Let them know that you heard it at Pharmacy Inspection Podcast. And as a final parting words, week after week, until next time, keep raising the bar.
Nice. What is does New York do inspections, like real 797 inspections, or no?
Ask that again.
Does New York do actual 797 inspections? Like what's their
No.
deal? No.
New York. New York is an interesting one. It was like 2014 or 2015. They adopted rules for compounding sterile CSPs. I can definitely get you a copy of that because the document doesn't really exist anymore. It was put on the state board's website, and under like the FAQs or practice issues section, and you could click it and see. And it was it was like 797. I think they were lacking any storage or beyond use dating for frozen products. In other words, they weren't really accepting that items be stored frozen. And I have that document all marked up with my pen with the circles and lines through it, so we can get that version together too.
Yeah.
It subsequently disappeared, so it no longer exists as an accessible document on their website.
Nothing's
And
replaced
I
it
don't
or
really
anything?
know. I don't know what's up with that. There wasn't a big announcement that it was going to exist, and there was no big announcement that it didn't exist anymore.
But it was never like an official document. It was more just like in their FAQs. That's weird.
Right, like here's our FAQ on electronic prescribing. But those are the rules that New York is going to expect you to follow for electronic prescribing. Okay, so that's how New York has a lot of discretion in that way, because it all comes back down to professional misconduct. You don't have a thermometer in your refrigerator that's calibrated. That's professional misconduct. So they don't have to write it to be able to know it and say that that's not okay. And they seem to be relying somewhat heavily on FDA to inspect the compounding pharmacies and let them know, if there's any issues. I've also seen New York close compounding pharmacies, with no FDA involvement. And I think that New York has some very good and thorough inspectors, and they're not even really looking at a 797 per se whatsoever. So.
How many? I don't know if you know this off the top of your head, but how many compounding pharmacies are in the state of New York, or maybe just upstate?
Well, that's an interesting question, because you're not required to register as a compounding pharmacy in New York State. So every pharmacy in New York State could be a compounding pharmacy, and we wouldn't know. And that includes sterile compounding, which I think is an oversight. I think they should have you register. Hey, minimally, I operate in your state and I do sterile compounding. So they want to keep a pulse on it. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
On their inspection sheet, there's a checkbox: retail pharmacy, non-sterile compounding, sterile compounding, veterinary medicine. So when they come in and inspect you, they're evaluating what you do, but they don't really know that before coming in, at least for the first time in a while. I mean, I don't know if this should be on the record, but I wasn't inspected by New York State for over 10 years. It might have been 13 or 14 years. New York State didn't step foot in my pharmacy.
And then one day they come in and they're like, full
They
bore.
came in
like,
and everything was great. And then FDA came in shortly after that. And then New York came in again, and everything was not so great at that secondary inspection. So it's that's fun. That's another conversation altogether.
Yeah. Interesting.